Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. Yes, I love that theme song. I play it a lot. Windows to your life. I could have titled this Sex, the Window to Your Life. And I'll tell you why I was thinking about this subject in particular. I was talking to a friend of mine, and the experience that she's having right now, she is sort of spreading her wings. There was a guy that she had dated for quite a while, and he's sort of waiting in the wings, but not because of her, but because of him. He didn't really get interested in her life in a way that he needed to, and he obviously had lots of opportunity to do so. So she kind of moved on. Well, not kind of. She did. She started dating somebody else, and it hasn't gotten to the intimacy phase yet. But, there's going to be this juxtapositioning of things, and I'm going to try to keep it straight for you. And why sex is the window to your life. The new guy who's in the picture has offered to do some really nice things for her. And she's engaged to want to experience that. But the old guy is sort of still in the picture. And not necessarily for wrong reasons, but she's not really entertaining the old guy per se. She's not going out with him, but it's, how relationships get when they're kind of on the tail end. The person who's on their way out, they kind of want to plead their case. They want to insert themselves into your life. And by doing so, and because they've had you, they've had the best of you, your intimacy, when you're being nurturing, all of those things. And when they were too busy to be available for it, they were busy doing whatever they do. And now when they find out you're not available the way that you had been, and I'm talking to you because we're talking about your experience, when they find out you're not available the way you had been in the past, then it becomes something for them to feel like, I'm being replaced. And, that doesn't feel good. I can honestly tell you I have been in that place where I've had to think about the experience that I was having, and did I bring this on myself? Was there a misunderstanding? All of that stuff comes into place. But back to my friend and what she's experiencing. Well, she's telling the old guy, look, I want to go on and live my life and experience these things. And what kind of brought it about, and this is why I say windows to your life. And the sex part, it's definitely going to play a role in this. She shared some details about herself with it's kind of hard to call him an ex, but I'm just going to use that for an ex just to say it. She shared some details of her life with the ex. And because they had been friends a long time, if you don't know your boundaries kind of thing, you might overshare. When we think of oversharing, we think of the person who says inappropriate things. They get into a group of people, they're at the party, they've really become uninhibited, and they just start saying stuff. And we think of that kind of oversharing, which, the inappropriate kind. Oh my gosh, wish they hadn't said that. But this is the kind of oversharing that happens when you're being honest, but sometimes you're telling too much of your life. And that's where I call it, the windows to your life. People don't need to know all of that. Because when they get that information, I'm not going to say it's, the person that's doing the listening is going to manipulate that, because if they have been dating you for a while, they feel like they still have something at stake here, especially when they think you're on your way out the door and you're going to go be with the new person. They don't necessarily want to be dismissed, meaning the ex. He doesn't want to be dismissed. He still wants to have a seat at the table. But if you're having a hard time moving on, and, this is one of those times when you really need your other friends. You don't need the ex-boyfriend as a listener. Because here's why. The ex-boyfriend, if I can call him that, I would venture to say that that's what the status of this thing is. The ex-boyfriend is thinking about all of the good times you had, sex included, and he's thinking somebody else is going to get it. This window about your past, or about your future with somebody new, and the ex getting that information, it's sort of a catalyst for him to, kick it in gear and to get going. Now, it doesn't work that way for everybody. Some people, when they find out that there's a new person on the horizon, they don't want to, they feel like their time is up and they move on. Other people, when they find out that you have a new love, then when they're the ex who has neglected you, they kind of want to, like I say, they want a seat at the table. And they might start pumping you for information. And if you're sort of naive about this whole thing, you just start talking, not realizing that you shouldn't have been giving all that information away. Because I can tell you, when it's somebody that you have been physically intimate with, and they're asking this information or getting this information from you, they may not even necessarily be asking directly. They could be really sneaky about getting the information, drawing it out of you, so to speak. And if you're really naive about the fact that your ex wants to know about your sex life when you are with a new person, they want to know. They sure as heck want to know. They want to know if you're getting it and if it's better with the new person than it was with them. Because we all have memories. Our memory of our love life with someone, especially when it was good, if it was good at one time, it doesn't go away. We love feeling good when we're having sex. But when there's a new person coming on and you're the ex and you're thinking about, wow, she is going to be with him, the new guy. I'm being squeezed out. I don't even have an opportunity to get back in with that. As possessive as it sounds, and territorial, that's kind of how, we go with that. Now, I'm using the guy as the example because this is an illustration. I was talking to a friend. She's a woman, and she was telling me about the guy and and what he says he wants now. He didn't do that. He didn't make all that effort before. But it could easily be the other way around. It could be a woman who finally decides that she wants to be more available, more committed, all the things that were missing in the relationship, more sexual, more adventurous, all of those things, playful. See, it goes both ways. So who's ever listening, just insert your ex, whether it's man or woman. But these things can become very convoluted. Because you could find yourself in the midst of reliving your old relationship, sort of working out what the problems were. And on one side of it, maybe you're the person who is now having an opportunity to have an honest conversation with the ex about what happened. Whereas the ex is treating this like this is a conversation that not only needed to be had because for whatever reason they couldn't be in the mindset, they couldn't be authentic, they couldn't be honest, truthful, whatever it is. It wasn't happening before, but now that they're able to have the conversation, they think, wow, you know what? This is going great. We could still be together because look at how well we're getting along right now. We're being open, we're being honest, and good things are happening. Well, Yeah, kind of, sort of. And I'm going to deal with that kind of, sort of after I come back from the commercial.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm John Johnson talking to you about windows to your life. And yes, this involves sex. When I left off at the last segment, I was talking about the sort of, kind of, when you're having this conversation with the ex, you are having this conversation and feeling really good about it because you're learning, you're sharing, you're having the conversation the way that you couldn't have when the relationship was going. And you're not thinking about having the relationship when I'm calling them ex because that's you. But the ex has been making a play for you, realizing that you're on the verge of moving on. Maybe you've dated a couple of times and you've let it be known that you're dating someone else. So the ex is trying hard to get you back, and they've got you into this conversation where, wow, they're sort of cleaning up some of the things that were not working when you had the relationship with the ex. You see, the windows part has to do with them having new information about you and your life. And this is why when you have a new life, when you're moving on with somebody else, this is why you don't have these conversations with an ex. See, an ex wants the sex. They want something of you that they can have that somebody else can't have. Sex is a big part of that. I mean, a lot of people are monogamous, so yes, sex would be a big part of that. But it's an experience that they have with you that they don't want to share you with somebody else. And, that's fine. I mean, that's how they feel. But if you play into the scenario and not establish a boundary about this whole thing, then you are setting yourself up for hurt in the way that when a person's perception about what they want of you, what they think is possible, and then it clashes with what you want for yourself at that moment. And if what you want for yourself at that moment is to be able to move on and have a new relationship, have new experiences, vis-a-vis everything that comes with that, but the ex is here really getting time with you, getting time in your ear. And think about why that would happen. That would happen because they're familiar to you. They know your quirks, your ins and outs, your desires. Maybe they've neglected you, yeah, but they're not ignorant to the fact that you have these things. And the fact that they have your attention now and are trying to, quote unquote, clean it up so that they can have an opportunity. And as I've said, have a seat at the table. It might put you in an awkward position. Maybe you're not comfortable dating two people at one time because it sort of changes the status, clearly. And the ex wants to be the only. And that song, I Want You Back. When I had you to myself, I didn't want you around because pretty faces always made you stand out in the crowd. Then someone picked you from the bunch. One glance was all it took. Now it's much too late for me to take a second look. That's a story of what? Somebody had the person, didn't pay attention to them, somebody else wanted them, and now the first guy wants her back. That's the song. The Jacksons did it. It's been around for years and years and years. But there's a lot of songs that have that same theme. But that one was right on the top of my mind. I can think of it. But think about that for a minute. We all want somebody just for ourselves. And even if we're neglectful, I mean, we could be remorseful about the fact that we've been so self-centered and neglectful. And when we feel worse, we know they're a good person and we've just been a jerk about it. Or you realize how neglectful you've been. You may not have thought you were doing that at the time, but when you get to that place, when that person is finally able to tell you their feelings, because they feel empowered now, they've got a new person in their life, and they feel alive, they feel invigorated. Because when they were with you, they were feeling sad. They were feeling too sad to want to talk about it because it hurt. But now that they've kind of moved on, they've got a new interest. People feel a little more, I don't want to say emboldened, because they're not trying to hurt the ex. They're just now in a place where they can tell them how they feel. And it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage and time to really get to figure out how you feel. There's a lot of things that cloud this. Sex is a big one. I mean, think about it. When you're being sexually intimate with someone, you are really connected to them in a physical, emotional, spiritual way. That's why it's hard to break those bonds. And when you finally get to a place where there's somebody new who could potentially come into your life, the ex-lover knows it. In their own way, they know it. But what you have to be careful about, like I say, with giving windows to your life, is sharing that information. Because in this moment of you call it therapy. It's your own story. You're getting the facts. You're really getting down to the truth, which is where you need to be anyway. There's a lot of growth that happens in these kinds of situations. A lot of potential for growth. I mean, anybody, I can tell you, if you've been in a situation like this, a lot of folks shut down because when it starts getting real, it can be very painful, and it takes a lot of work to be able to step through this and get to the other side. Because I know we want the hurt to stop. I mean, that's why the relationship ended in the first place, because there was a lot of hurt around that. And opening or reopening old wounds is not something that we enjoy doing. At least I never did. To the point where things that needed to be discussed, yeah, but for me, it wasn't about descending into insults or trying to hurt the other, but sometimes there are questions that needed to be asked so that then you can then put it away so you can heal and then move forward. I think we've all been there because we've been in our lives, and sometimes being in your own life, you're not necessarily present to all the things that are going on, especially in your relationship. You can be busy doing your life, considering that the relationship is there. That's your partner. They are in your life. But are you really conscious as to how they're feeling? And what part you play in what's going on? I can think of many times where being self-centered, you didn't think that's what you were doing, but you just weren't being conscious as to where your partner was. When it comes to pleasure, you kind of, you know where to get it. And not just sex, but sex is a big part of it. When it comes to pleasure, you know where to get it. And when that is, or looks like it's going to cease to be part of your plan, your existence, then it gets our attention. And that's kind of how in this situation that's playing out with my friend who has a new love interest. I mean, it's not heavy. It hasn't been in there a long time, but it is brand new because she's not someone who picks up and moves very fast. She kind of moves at a snail's pace, but she does move. And the ex is really pounding on the door trying to get back in. And what I feel for her is that anxiety, that angst around the whole conversation about, what's next, where it goes. But I project that what I think is going to happen is, like a lot of people, when they are in the place that they're finally moving on, she's just really getting answers about things about her past that have sort of been open. And she's able to put those things away. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Let me break to a commercial, and I'll talk about this some more.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, talking about windows to your life. Yes, sex is a huge window to your life, and it's something that you probably want to draw the curtains on as it pertains to you and people that you have been involved with in the past. Now, I'm going to sidebar here. The time when sex and your intimate encounters might be someone else's business is if there is some sort of medical situation that you need to communicate, then being open and direct, because it's a medical situation, that's when it's important. So I just wanted to stipulate that. Stay healthy, practice safe sex, advocate that. Please get yourself tested. I was just hearing today that here in California, the sexually transmitted diseases they're kind of on an upswing. And interesting that is the case. So, again, I have to go back to practicing safe sex. Now back to my thing about the windows to your life and why in this story that I'm telling you, and this is true, these are all facts. This is not something I'm making up, but I'm trying to tell it as a point of, educating you ahead of the fact and about where people's minds go, especially in this subject. Because one of the things that you also want to protect your feelings, and this isn't about bragging. Sometimes people just aren't aware of the impact of what you say when you give people information about your life, like I say, the windows to your life. And exes go through all kinds of things. They go through their jealousy phase, they go through they're being selfish about this, that, and the other, and then when the realization comes about that, wow, they're actually no longer going to be in my life because somebody else is filling the void. People, like I said, being replaced is, wow, that hits you in a way that nothing else does. Because that's not to say that you don't matter. I mean, at one time you obviously were very important, but for whatever reasons, we transition out of that and we move on to the next. And, there are all of those expressions. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and insert your expression here. I tend to look at it as when somebody is ready to move on, you kind of have to let them go where they're going to go. You can't talk them out of it because you only become more responsible for their disappointment. And if they've already got this thing in their mind about how the relationship with you has already gone, they're pretty much expecting more of the same. Or they may expect improvement, but how long is that going to happen? How long is it going to stay better? I mean, you're focusing on it now because before they were an option, now they're a priority. But when you go back to doing your regular life, what's going to happen? Probably go back to being an option. And that's going to bring back all the old stuff, brings back the old bitterness. Now you want to stay out of that. I mean, and it's hard. It's definitely hard to juggle a lot of things when it comes to relationships. It's definitely it's a two-person effort. That is if you're dealing in monogamous. But if it's polygamous, or polyamorous, let me say. If it's polyamorous, then, there's other dynamics that are at play, and you can kind of balance the things out. But it's a challenge. So I've talked about why you don't necessarily want to give other people windows to your life. And it gives other people false hope. Too much information is too much information. And the question is, why do we give too much information? Well, it's because we want them to know that we're moving on. It's not just about being honest. It's more than that. We want them to know that we're moving on. We can do it without you. There might have been a time when we were really dependent upon that person that we are now moving away from. So we let them know. And we do that. There's another reason too. We give them that information. So almost to tell them, look, I don't need you anymore. I'm trying to tell you that I'm moving on. So it's not in the backhanded way as if smack, I'm moving on, but it's also in the way to let it, to be definitive about it. I am with somebody else now. That's a very powerful thing to be able to do for yourself. You are validating your right to move on, to be with someone else, to close one chapter, and to open another door or open another chapter of your life, and to move forward. And the thing that I want to talk about briefly here when it comes to breaking up is, and this is always a difficult subject because in that transition phase, it's, you go back and forth. There's the longing for the companionship of something that's real familiar. And sometimes we forget all the reasons why we left. But they will come back. The reasons we'll be reminded very quickly when that person shows up and starts doing all the stuff that bothered the heck out of us. But it's partly to give yourself not only permission to move on, but to grow. You have to continue to grow and improve yourself and who you are, and to not be stagnant for your sake, not for the other person, but for your sake. It's usually times like this when having to be our own advocate is really a challenge, especially when you've been the nurturer in the relationship. You obviously are going to be thinking about the other person, how they're feeling, and you're probably emoting and making a big, making a big production out of the fact, oh, wait, I wanted to end. You got to be able to really state for your sake, what it is you need and why you need to move on. And I'm just putting this out there just to complete the loop here, if going back is something that you think is an option for you, if you're leaving the door to going back to the ex, you don't want to do it wondering if you've made a mistake in going back. Commitments being what they are, we need to be able to make a commitment and understand why we're committed through thick and thin. And the point of what I'm saying is this: sometimes you need to move on and experience your growth to be able to know why something happened to you before. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does, because it's in those experiences of the growth and learning, being around something else, it gives you contrast. A lot of people are in relationships because they're stuck. Not because it's a good place for them to be, but it's because they're stuck. And if you were to talk to them about their stuck feeling, putting aside the fact that they love the person, let's just put that part aside. If they really had a choice, they wouldn't want to be stuck. But sometimes it really is a factor of who you choose to let into your life. And they have an impact on you. We would easily say at any given time, we want people around us who support us, who love us, who want the best for us. But quite often, that's not where we end up. We have all of these other things tugging at us, and we feel beholden to people who would continually upend our own self-interest, which if you are your best self, then you could be better for them too. See, it can be really convoluted to be able to sort that out. And that's why having your own time, your own space to think about these things is so vitally important. And if I can tie this back to when you're being physically intimate with someone and you've worked out all of those things, that's when it's really powerful and special. There's a deep bond between you and somebody who really gets you, who wants the best for you, who contributes to your life, and you really feel powerful. You can see the impact you have on their life. And celebrating the gift, the feeling, the emotion, what do you feel when you're in lovemaking? Ah, man, that's great stuff. That's somebody who should be allowed to peek into the windows of your life, or better yet, be in the room with you. Here's something I'd like you to know. If whatever medium you're listening to me through, click subscribe. I'd love for you to follow me and check out my other podcasts on the subject of relationships and sex. I'm John Johnson, and I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.